So let's look at another theory of behavioral change, the theory of reasoned action, or sometimes called the theory of planned behavior. And this is more of an interpersonal level theory as opposed to just an individual theory, though it does focus on the perceptions of an individual. It does talk about how they might relate to others. Okay, and here's what it looks like. The theory was developed by Agin and Fishbein in 1967, and the core assumption of the theory is that people's behavior is determined by their intention to perform the behavior, which is a cognitive representation of a person's readiness to actually do the behavior. Intention in this model is a function of attitudes towards the behavior, such as a behavior around texting and driving. Subjective norms around the behavior, such as what a person feels important others in their lives would support and want them to do, and perceived control, whether they're able to actually change their behavior and not text and drive. So the mission of the theory is to understand the relationship between beliefs, attitudes, and intentions towards behaviors. Fishbein was able to demonstrate that a person's attitude toward a specific behavior, such as not texting or using a condom or seeking a mammogram, would better predict their behavior than their attitudes towards the outcome of not taking on the behavior, such as worrying about an illness, or worrying about an STD or breast cancer. Okay. So let's go through each construct of the theory. And just to let you know, there's a suggested reading on Blackboard by Reynolds around testing a model for parental acceptance of HPV vaccine using the theory's health belief model and theory of reasoned action. And this really, really gives a great example of how these models can be used. So I hope that you'll look at this. But anyway, let's start with behavioral attitudes. Behavioral attitudes are beliefs regarding the outcomes of the behavior. So an outcome of not texting and driving might be, I'm a good driver, so I don't need to not text. Not texting will not change anything. Texting and driving is not so big a deal, so I don't want to stop. I'm young and I have good reflexes, so I don't want to stop. So this is an attitude toward a behavior, towards intention, and then towards a behavior. And you can find out from a group of people what their behavioral attitudes are towards a behavior, and then intervene to try to either change those attitudes or maybe even enforce those attitudes. Subjective norms are probably the crux of this theory. Very, very important. They're the beliefs about what important others will think and your motivation to comply with them. So these are related to the idea that someone's beliefs about what others want them to do is important to them and that they want to please them. This is sort of towards role models, the idea that people who people look up to should be the ones to suggest behavior change. We see this in advertisements all the time with sports figures and celebrities suggesting that you buy or watch something. Here, in terms of health behaviors, it's important to find out who are the most important people for that health behavior and whether somebody who finds those people to be important and if they want to please them. An example from my own research is work I did in North Carolina with a project called Save Our Sisters. And in the 90s and the early 2000s, African American women in North Carolina were not getting mammograms at the rate that other women were getting in the United States. And there were many reasons for this. And so we wanted to share the message of the benefits of having a mammogram, but how to do so. Right? There was not a lot of trust in doctors at that time or in agencies that served women like the American Cancer Society. So we went about to try to find out who were the people that women in these communities looked up to. And we found out that they looked up to their elders. And so we gathered important elders, people who were revered in their communities, and trained them in information around the benefits of getting a mammogram and asked them to just go out and talk to people in their social networks about the importance of getting a mammogram. And we found when we did an experimental and control trial of this with 5 communities with lay health advisors and 5 communities that didn't have it, those communities with lay health advisors, these older women who were trained to talk to younger women in their social networks about the importance of mammogram, we found that mammograms did increase. So that's how we use subjective norms towards changing a behavior. Perceived behavioral control is the perceived facilitators and barriers to performing a behavior and perceived power. Okay, so if you have perceived control, you'll be more likely to have an intention to actually do a behavior. So think about this if you wanted to find out if somebody had felt they had control to not text and drive. Somebody might say, but people expect me to be available all the time. I feel pressure to answer and send texts while I drive. I just can't stop texting while I drive. Somebody might say, I can avoid texting while I drive. They have that perceived behavioral control. The idea is, in terms of interventions, is to increase this perception of control in a way that would make somebody want to have the intention to actually perform the behavior. I gotta just change my page here. Okay. So intentions are the crux of this as well, right? They're the like sort of modifier or the mediator between these attitudes and a behavior. It's the intentions to perform the behavior change. The idea is finding out what do people plan to do, and then finding out what they actually did. Because we know that this model can't be perfect. Just because people say they intend to not text and drive or put away their phone, that doesn't mean that actually happened. So in interventions, you try to, at the end, really find out what are people's intentions, and then maybe a few months later follow up and find out how did that go. Okay. So here's an example of a simple though complex poster that was grounded in the theory of planned behavior, and it especially focuses on normative beliefs. Here we see friends don't let friends text and drive. Okay. It doesn't say parents don't let their kids text and drive, because it probably wasn't found that young people who drive would really care about that at that moment. It's more friends. And so somebody did research to find out who these people cared about and whether they would actually follow the behaviors that are being asked. Like I said, I've put up an article on Blackboard that uses constructs from the health belief model and the theory of reasoned action around parental acceptance of HPV vaccine for their young daughters. And they used a survey with parents and questions that reflected health belief model constructs such as perceived susceptibility, severity, benefits, and barriers. And then also theory of reasoned action constructs of normative beliefs, attitudes towards the vaccine, and the intent to get their child vaccinated. And they found that intent to vaccinate was indeed associated with perceived susceptibility, the behavioral attitudes and being pro-vaccine, and normative beliefs in caring especially what their doctors wanted them to do. So you could see that possibly an intervention would be working with providers to make sure that they make these recommendations, because people want that recommendation and they want to please their doctor. Finally, check out the PSAs I posted on Blackboard. They're very interesting. The second one, Do It for the Loved Ones in Your Life, was developed in the 1970s and should make you smile a bit. And they're both based on normative beliefs of, trying to do things for the ones that you love. So take a look at those, and we will come back for another mini lecture to talk about the trans-theoretical model. Thanks.